Today I'm going to teach you a couple of the basics of the CSS grid. What is up, guys? So when I say I'm going to teach you a couple of the basics of the CSS grid, I really only mean a couple of the basics. If you remember in the last video, we built a sitemap using Jekyll, so we pulled in all of our web pages and we filtered some of them out. Well, when you saw that on that web page, I had already had that styled with the CSS grid. So today I'm going to be showing you how I styled that CSS grid. Now there are some styles on the unordered list and the list items and the anchor tags inside of those list items, but it's nothing crazy and it's nothing really important aside from a margin of like 10 pixels on the right and 1 rem on the bottom. That's it for the margin, and everything else really just has to do with the text, the color, the font size, the font weight, and all that stuff. So I'm just going to skip over those and leave those in place, but I'm going to show you the 2 lines of code that it took to build that CSS grid. So let's go ahead and jump into it real quick and I'll show you what I did. Alright guys, so I've gone ahead and pulled up the project that we were working on in last week's tutorial with building the sitemap using Jekyll, and I've got it right here so you can see exactly what this looks like. All of our pages, all of our events, all of our posts, and if you look, it's actually in this grid. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns and as many rows as it needs to fill out all of these pages. So I'm going to show you how it's responsive right now. So what it is when you start collapsing it, you see now it collapsed to 3 columns and the rows have expanded to fit all the pages in automatically. And let's keep shrinking. It should break again. There you go. Now we have 2 columns with more rows. And then when we get down to the mobile size right here, it's broken down into a single column, and that's it. It's this 1 column, and that's all we need, because some of these can be very lengthy titles, especially when we get into the posts and the events. So this works great, and this is all using the CSS grid, and this is actually only using 2 lines of code to do this. Okay, so I'm gonna pull up well, let me refresh this real quick. And now you'll see it's all in this single line. This is without any of the CSS grid code put in there. I cleared it out for this so I can show you what I used and why I used it. And you see it's not responsive at all. The only thing you see breaking right there is just the media queries that I have for the padding for this section. That has nothing to do with the grid itself. So I'm going to pull up the code here real quick and let's go to our sitemap. So right here is our sitemap, and this is where we're going to add those lines of code. So to get things started, we have to add the display of grid, just like that. All right. Now let's go back to the web page, and before I refresh the page and show you what it changed, let's go ahead and see how this looks when we view the styling here. So we'll see we just have a list item and it's stretching all the way across, and we have a little bit of padding. We have 10 pixels on the right and about 1 rem on the bottom of that list item, and it's the same for all of these going down minus this last one, because I changed in here the last of type. I changed the margin to 0. So now let me go ahead and refresh this page and we'll see how this changes. So now that the page is refreshed, let's scroll down and just hover over these items, and look at that. You see those lines? That is part of the grid. That is pretty much the grid right now. I mean, that's what it looks like. I mean, you can't see that here. Let me go out of developer mode. You can't see any of that, but the grid is now there. So each one of these LIs is encapsulated by that grid. So right now there's one other line of code that we need to go ahead and add so that we can make this look how it did before and fit into columns and the appropriate amount of rows. So to do that, we're going to come back over here and we are going to go ahead and write grid template columns. Okay, now inside of there, this is how we set up what our columns look like. So you could put 20 pixels, 20 pixels, 20 pixels, 20 pixels, 50 pixels, and you will have one column looking like 20 pixels, another one 20, another one 20 pixels and another 20 pixels, and then the last one is going to be 50 pixels. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to set things like that. I want this to be very fluid and responsive, so I don't want to have a like a very specific set width and set amount of columns. So what we're going to do is we're going to write repeat, maybe if I can write it, and let's go parentheses auto fill min max, and I'm going to set the min max to 300 pixels and 1 FR, which I believe is a fractional unit. Let me go and tell you why I am using the autofill function right here. So what the autofill does is it essentially adds columns to the layout according to the container's width. So if it needs to add some columns to fill out the entire width of that page, it will. So let's go back here and refresh this, and now you'll see we have a grid, and let's see if it's responsive. Perfect. That is exactly what we were looking for. That is exactly how it was when I showed you in the beginning of this video. So let's go back and just look at this one more time, and you can see how this looks now. So we see we have all of these grid items essentially, and it's set to a min max of 300 pixels and 1 fractional unit. And if we look down here, that autofill, you see these empty grid items here? Those wouldn't be there if it weren't for that autofill function. And now let's go ahead and take this and look at it in a phone's perspective. Now you'll see the same grid items going all the way down, but when we get to the last one, you'll notice, you know how there was like 3 extras? There are no extras, and you want to know why there's no extras? Because it's autofill, it does not need to fit any more grid items in here to make up the entire width of this grid. Alright guys, so that's it for this video. That is actually all you need to do to get that CSS grid up and running. That's all it took me to do. There's 2 lines of code, and it works seamlessly on almost every browser. I think the only browsers that have an issue with it is Opera Mini and Internet Explorer from version 11 down, I believe. But other than that, it's supported really well everywhere. And I'm going to start using CSS Grid more. So if you would like me to create a more in-depth video on the CSS Grid, leave your comments down below and let me know. But anyways, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you want to help support this channel, go on over to my Patreon account at patreon.com/ZacharyRNewton, where you can support this channel and help me create better videos every week. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.